Rip that up. No harm, because I'm going to have to do a lot of work to patch this seam anyway. And I always think about slip too. I don't want super, super heavy water content in my slip. I want something that is going to have a good amount of material. The more water in a material, the more shrinkage is going to happen. So be careful of making your slip a little watery. I make mine kind of material saturated. And for me, that works really well. Again, different artists will have different perspectives on that too. I've seen really skilled hand builders that get away with minimal scoring and water. Not with everything they build, but more than I would dare to do. I say overkill. And I like to keep my own slip so I can kind of keep it at the material consistency I want, get a closed container of it. And I'm not always kind of forced with doing what I'm doing right now, kind of getting it to where I want it to be out of the reclaim bin. Just steal something next time you go to a recycling bin. Any container with a lid will work really well. If you eat at the cafeteria, those little to-go like sauce souffle cups work really well. But for me, that's where I like my slip. Okay. I'm just gonna put it on with the fork because I know I'm gonna get my hands all dirty. I wanna move quick. I usually like putting on slip with a brush just to keep things a little bit cleaner. It's like when you're cooking, you're breading something, and you're trying to keep one of your hands out of the egg wash. You know what I mean? I never do. I always end up, like if you're dipping something in egg and then in flour, you end up with like tons of stuff on your fingers. And I always try to keep one of the hands clean. Like this is my dunking hand, and I always end up with them both dirty.
I always forget halfway through, so they both end up dirty.
What'd you say?
I always forget halfway through, so they both end up dirty.
I get impatient. Okay. So I have no idea if it's centered or not, and that's going to be the tough thing. You're going to have to figure out how to center it again. That's another reason I like leaving the bat on there. It gives me an idea a little bit easier if it's tipped this way or not, so you can see it. Right now I know it's not on center. If I take my finger, I'm going to hold my finger still. You can tell it's uneven in one place. So wherever it's hit, the bat's hitting my finger is where it's kind of cocked up to the side. I need to bring it down a little bit. I also want to look down here. I can tell it's not centered down here. So I'm going to worry about this first. And I haven't pushed it down really hard, so I know it's going to move. So I can tell it's not quite lining up there. That's better. And remember, you're not going to get totally perfect, because I know too, because this is still attached up here, this is shrunk a little funky too, because this part was attached to the bat while the rest was shrinking, right? So for me, a couple things kind of work when I'm trying to find another center. I have slip and score in between here, so once I find it, I can just press down and make a final. So I'm going to be really patient about this, understanding it's going to be the rest of the vessel. Doing kind of a needle tool-esque approach, where I'm taking a tool and finding out where it's off. Wherever it's hitting my knife right now, it's cocked up, so I need to bring that side down. So I can tell my knife's hitting right here, right? I also can do that down here. I'm gonna pick this area because it's closest to my piece. I know this is gonna be very off, right? Because I know it's shrunk a little bit funny. So it's not on center this way either. It's just hitting on one portion. So I can find that line and move it. Closer it's gonna get, slighter my movements get. The other thing I can do is just kind of eyeball it until it looks right. And to be honest, that's usually my approach. I know because my walls are the same thickness and I put that bevel in there. The bottom was beveled like this. The top I beveled up, so when I flipped it over, they fit really nice together. That's gonna help make for a strong connection. I know that will kind of help me get a little bit closer. I can also tap center this a little bit, and it's gonna move. You wanna be careful. If you're tap centering and your piece is not dry, you're gonna be in a whole world of trouble. You're just gonna be making your piece really off. This is pretty darn stiff, so I can do that. And I know I'm not gonna be able to get dead on, dead on. I'm also gonna have like that expectation of just a little bit of wiggle room. The other thing I know, I've gotta cut this off the bat. I can also cut the top to make it even, right? So if it's a little off this way, I'm gonna be able to work around that a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do just a little bit more fussing with it. Move it here. It's starting to stick, so that tap centering isn't gonna work as well right now because it's just starting to adhere. That's looking better, eh? Did you folks see the Chiefs won the Super Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
I was not happy about that.
That was a good game, though.
I almost went into double overtime. You can't say it was boring. This didn't have the outcome I prefer. I think that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to press down on this because I want this to stay. And now I'm going to cut this off. I'm not going to do it with a needle tool because I want like a more aggressive cutting tool. I'm going to try the serrated knife. And again, I'm not super concerned if I make this cut really badly, just because I know I can get back in here and cut the tippy top again. So I'm going to try my darndest.
And the shape has not been trimmed yet, yes? The two shapes?
Mm-mm. And I'm actually going to soften this back up. And I'm going to throw it and shape it a little bit more from softening it back up. Remember when I was saying this part was a little bit stiffer than I had hoped?
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes you get in here right on the money and then sometimes you don't. So you need to be able to adjust your clay. What I'm going to be doing after I make this connection, and make this connection really well and strong, is I'm going to be wrapping the upper portion of this pretty aggressively and damp a little more towards the wet side paper towel. And I want to get this a little soft so that I might be able to get this soft enough where I can actually throw with it again. That's going to take a lot of rehydration. And if this is too much and it's going to throw my bottom off, that's okay. I can center it again. This is very leather hard. Because this this got a little stiffer than I imagined, I actually could have just wired it off, and that's okay too. Now I'm actually going to try the needle tool, what I said I didn't want to use, because I think it'll get in there just a little bit better. And it's pretty thick down there, so it's going to take like a good long while to go through there. If that clay was softer, I would have been in better shape. But it's not, so I think it's good for a demo purpose, so that you can see like things don't always go to plan. It's like, what do you do next? Now we're just going to take a wire tool, and I'm just going to be pulling one side towards me. Got there-ish. Now we can just trim it level. Because I can get my finger in here, I'm going to be able to do it a little bit easier. Without that bat in the way, you can also see I can put my hand, my arm at a better angle. So we're all right. So now what we got to do is make sure that we connect this well. So if you have a form where you can get your hands on the inside and the outside, that's best, because you can reinforce that connection from the interior and the exterior. Not every shape you'll have that ability. So we're going to do it just on the outside with this. I'm gonna cover that up because I forgot to after I brought it out. So I don't want it getting any drier. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna add a reinforcement coil to that, add a really nice piece of clay, work that in there, and then I'm gonna set it aside because I want the clay that I'm putting in that connection to really start working into that.
Will you also add the wet paper towels at this time to get?
I'll do it right after I kind of figure this out. And then I'm gonna wrap it real tight. I don't really care too much about how neat and tidy this is because I'm just gonna work this in really, really aggressively, and I'm just gonna kind of trim off the excess. So it doesn't have to be something really neat and tidy. What I want is I want to jam some clay in that connection point, and then I want to give this some time to become one. I often find like when I have things not work out, it's because they're like totally different stiffnesses. This is so much softer than this and this. I want these to hang out together under plastic. This water that is in the new clay that I'm adding to move into the existing leather hard clay. And I'm not going to come back to this for like a day. And then the key, I find often when you're working on compound forms, use a stiff rib when you're connecting two pieces together. Don't use a soft rib. Don't let your metal rib go really flexible. I usually just use that for shaping at the end. I'm going to use a wooden rib to make this connection really stable. So, in an ideal world, I could get my little tiny hand in here. There's no way I can do that, right? So what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm connecting this really, really well on the outside. So you can see how I'm holding my rib, right? Making sure it's really stable. And I want to make sure that I'm really jamming as much clay as I can into that connection point, and I'm compressing it. If I can get to the inside and outside of something that I'm doing, I'm going to do this on the inside, same thing on the outside, and I'm going to go wooden rib to wooden rib. One on the inside, one on the outside, and really jam that clay and compress it together. Likely what I'm going to end up doing is after this initial compression, I'm going to keep a little bit of this clay aside and get it a little bit stiffer, and I might try that technique again. I can run a trimming tool over this, a metal rib over this to clean it up. Oops. What I want to be concerned about with now is just really making sure, right at that seam, the clay is really well worked together. I'm not as concerned about aesthetics right now. Now I'm using my metal rib press like this, so I can just kind of work that clay onto itself. But look at that bottle form I have in like 2 seconds. Work in a scale that is approachable to you. Everybody has different abilities. What I want you to do is be ambitious in both the form and the scale. Think about something that is out of your reach. So now I'm going to wrap this to try to soften this back up. If it doesn't work, I have a backup plan. So if I can get this soft enough where I can throw with it again, great. If I can't, I can trim to the inner dimension, right? So if you look at the inside of this, it has an opening about this wide, okay? And then I can add some other components onto it. What I want to try to do is get this a little bit soft so I can shape it without trimming it, maybe throw it. But if that doesn't work and I can't get it soft enough again, I'm going to be able to just trim that component and kind of add some clay on the top to finish it out. So now I kind of have a little bit of a choice. Do I wire this off right now? And, you know, that can be challenging to figure out like when you want to wire your thing loose. Because I have some more jamming to do up here, I'm actually not going to do that. I want to give this some time to soften back up, and then when I jam on this, if I have it just attached by that water kind of suction component, like when I'm trimming, because I can do that. If I'm really trying to kind of work with this clay up here, is it going to pop loose on me over and over again? The answer is probably going to be yes, so I'm going to choose to keep this I'm going to choose to keep it attached. It's already not like perfectly on center anymore. Does it look okay right now? Yeah. I think that's something you also need to keep in mind. When something is spinning, you can see that thing out of center. But when you make something big and challenging, it's only being looked at while it's still. I'm making sure I gather the water that I dripped on there and it's off of there. And then I'm like really aggressively rehydrating this. Like these towels are wet, you can see them dripping. This is usually like a pretty aggressive dampness that I wouldn't use. For this situation, I need to get that clay so soft to be able to throw with it again. That's a really, really tall order, okay? So it may not get there, it may get there. I'm gonna look at it tomorrow. And then when we come back Thursday, we'll see what it was doing.
When you talk about throwing with it again,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to try and change the shape of it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I want it.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah. So that's a lot softer than it is right now, right? So
Yeah.
that's a lot, right? So I'm going to do a few things. Wet, wet, wet towel to see if I can get it there.